Stiff 5. DeSalvo, CONT'd. Franklin C. Stiff is a frequent guest on our show. Franklin has received a special award from the Chicago Funeral Parlors Association Board Directors. Let's welcome our pal Franklin C. Stiff. Stiff. Thank you, Frank. DeSalvo. Tell us about this special award called the Final Destination Award you've received. Stiff. Well, Frank, I not one to brag, but also deserving of this award is my wife, Stella, my daughter Stilla Stiff, and my brother-in-law Henry Lipschitz. They have all created an atmosphere around our sunny side-up cemetery that is worthy of praise. We are a final destination for the deceased, as it were. DeSalvo. Your innovative ideas are the talk of Chicago. Stiff. Yes, Frank, at Sunny Side Up Cemetery we've created a potluck theme where funeral attendees kick off their shoes, blast Reg G, and hip-hop music and share stories of their departed loved ones. DeSalvo. Is it catching on? Stiff, CONT'd. Thank you for asking, Larry. Yes. We even have kids dressing up in Grim Reaper and Spider-Man outfits, little girls and boys dressing like Prince and Princess, and adults dressed in zombie outfits portraying their favorite characters in The Walking Dead. DeSalvo. Sound like you've created a theme park and wax museum. With the deceased family's permission we will, a cut-rate price, have a life-size wax statue of your loved one. One special treat is your deceased loved one could be holding a glass of wine or a martini toasting you as you walk by. Isn't that special? Larry. Who came up with that idea? Stiff. My daughter Stilla. Larry. Your daughter Stilla Stiff. Stiff. Correct. Remember, Frank and Larry, we are innovators. My daughter Stilla has designated areas in our botanical gardens that family members that desire to have their loved one honored for decades can use their ashes as plant food for young sprouting trees. DeSalvo. It sounds like you've thought of everything. Stiff. I'm just the messenger. My wife Stella, daughter Stilla Stiff, and brother-in-law Henry Lipschitz deserve all the credit. They're constantly thinking up new ideas to help the families of the terminally dead. DeSalvo. I know you have a son. Is he involved with Sunny Side Up Cemetery? Stiff. My son Stanley Stiff is in the process of opening a breakfast bar at the main entrance of Sunny Side Up Cemetery. DeSalvo. I'm afraid to ask, what his menu look like? Stiff. We call it the Sunny Side Up Breakfast Bar. Menu, appetizers, main courses and specials are in the planning stages. DeSalvo. Larry and I can't wait to visit your Sunny Side Up Breakfast Bar. Stiff. We will offer specials that will be designed to keep you healthy while giving you credit for every dollar spent toward an account that used for any future funeral needs. You can use these credits toward future services you or your family may require when you reach, in the event you choose to join your loved one in their special place. DeSalvo. When you come back for another visit we'll talk about that and other plans you have for the Sunny Side Up Cemetery. Again, thanks Franklin, you've been thought-provoking. We hope your cemetery will be the last thing a family thinks of when they lose their loved one. That didn't come out right. Stiff 6. DeSalvo. Life and death experiences are what our frequent guest is all about. Let's welcome again our favorite funeral director Franklin C. Stiff, president of the Chicago Funeral Parlors Association. Stiff. Thank you, Frank. A special shout out to your Wise Guys cooking audience. They've made our Sunny Side Up Cemetery one of the most visited and sought-after final destinations in Chicago. DeSalvo. Did you say final destinations? Stiff. Did I say final? Well, Frank, you know what I mean. DeSalvo. Since we last had you on our show we talked about your son Stanley Stiff opening up a breakfast bar at Sunny Side Up Cemetery. DeSalvo. How's that coming along? Stiff. We call it our Sleepy Hollow menu. It's designed to get you in and out of Sleepy Hollow, so you can spend more time with your deceased loved one. DeSalvo. What are the names of some of your breakfast plates? Stiff. We have a breakfast sushi plate called Hari Kari. It's one of my favorites. Another popular breakfast treat are eggs topped with a special Native American sauce called the Last of the Mohicans. Last but not least, an original recipe created by my daughter Stilla Stiff, the end of the rainbow. And she created a dessert menu that bar none. DeSalvo. What are some of your favorites? Stiff. The Last Dance omelette. I had you babe bacon and eggs. It's now or never. Pancake sandwich. DeSalvo. Close. Stiff 7 hairdresser. DeSalvo. We proud to have our favorite funeral parlor director Franklin C. Stiff today. As you know, he's received numerous awards from the Chicago Funeral Parlors Association. Ladies and gentlemen, last have a warm hand for Franklin C. Stiff. Stiff. Thank you, Frank. I delighted to be here with you today. DeSalvo. I see you've brought your brother Stanley Stiff with you. Stiff. Yes, Frank, he's been styling hair for our deceased patrons for the past 15 years. DeSalvo. I didn't know your funeral parlor offered this service. Stiff. Yes, Frank, this is one of the bonuses you'll receive if you want your loved one to look his or her very best when you visit them during funeral services. DeSalvo. Let's welcome Franklin C. Stiff's brother Stanley Stiff to our Wise Guys cooking audience. Stiff and Stiff shake hands with Larry and Frank. Stanley. I have a unique job, Frank. Making sure our clientele look their very best for their grieving families. I've never had any complaints. DeSalvo. How long have you been a hairstylist to the dead? Stanley. Frank, this is really a side gig for me. My salon is next to Franklin's funeral parlor. DeSalvo. What is the name of your salon? Stanley. The Curly Up and Dye Salon. DeSalvo. The Curly Up and Dye Salon? Dye. Stanley. It's spelled D-Y-E. You know, Mr. DeSalvo, not the word dye, D-I-E. DeSalvo. Glad we got that straight. Stanley. This side job at my brother's funeral parlor helps pay for gas and my motorcycle payment. I also have a small band that plays at the funeral home on Sunday nights called Stanley and the Four Stiffs. DeSalvo. Sounds like the Stiff family has talent. Stiff. You should hear them, Frank, they play music you love, right out of the Great American Song Book. DeSalvo. I'd love to sing with your band some Sunday night. Stiff. Frank, you would love our funeral parlor's signature tune, Save the Last Dance for Me. DeSalvo. Stanley, how did you get this job? Stanley. If I recall, Frank, and my brother can clarify this, after I gave him a haircut at my salon, he asked me if I was interested in a life-changing part-time job. DeSalvo. And? Stanley. I said, of course, when can I start? He told me he had a body over at the funeral parlor, and I could start right after work. After all, it right next door. DeSalvo. How did your first meeting with, Stanley. Franklin did not want to leave me alone for my first job. He was kind enough to wheel the first dead person into the showroom. Stiff. That was perfectly understandable, don't you think, Frank? DeSalvo. Absolutely. Stiff. I introduced Stanley to his first customer so they could be on a first-name basis. Stanley. Franklin did not want to leave me alone. But it was really comfortable after we're introduced. I asked what their names were. When he left, I made small talk to familiarize myself with the deceased so I didn't feel like I was intruding. DeSalvo. How is it different to style a dead person? Franklin? Stiff. Speaking from experience, it doesn't take as long because you only have to do the sides and the front. But since they're lying down, it's challenging because you have to get it to look they're standing up. DeSalvo. How is this different than working in your salon? Stanley. I'm used to people talking at me all day, complaining about their lives, gossiping. So it's a nice way to end the day making someone beautiful who can't talk to you. DeSalvo. Franklin, your brother Stanley sound like a natural. Stanley. I really enjoy working at the funeral parlor. I can rehearse my 40s tunes, old standards, even some hip hop. You know, Frank, you never know if they're watching, but if they are watching, I want it to be uplifting for them. DeSalvo. Do you ever wonder what they're thinking? Stiff. Frank, remember they're dead. DeSalvo. Stanley? Stanley. I don't get scared or freaked out. I'll say, if I'm doing something you don't like, just let me know. Then I'm a little scared they're going to let me know. DeSalvo. Is it totally creepy? Stiff. I have to thank my brother Stanley for being so patient. He looks very comfortable styling our client's hair. Sometimes he's in a room with 6 bodies, it looks overwhelming. Stanley. You know, Frank. I talk to them, and the only difficulty is trying to hear them talking back. DeSalvo. Well, many thanks to the Stiff brothers. Franklin and Stanley will be right back after this short break. CONT'd. Shrink Michael Dees and the Pope. Dees. Hey Ava, please send in my next patient. Hi Frank. What troubles you today? My record here indicates you have illusions that you're the Pope. Pope. Thank you. He gives Dees his blessing, returns the blessing with a fist pump. You know, Doc, before I leave for the Vatican I have to get something off my chest. Dees. Well, why don't you start from the beginning? Pope. Okay, in the beginning I created the heavens and the earth. Dees. You created the heavens and the earth? Pope. Sometimes I think I'm God, then I think I'm the Pope. I think I've got a split personality. Dees. A split personality? Pope. When I go to a restaurant by myself, I ask for separate checks. Dees. You're a very popular Pope. Pope. I know. My sermon at the Vatican before I left was very uplifting. It was so good I got a kneeling ovation. Dees. How was your flight over from the Vatican? Pope. To tell you the truth, the flight over was very shaky. Somebody from the back of the plane yelled, "You're the Pope, do something religious," so I took up a collection. Dees. Why are you really here? I want to help. Pope. Honestly, I want to start dating again. Dees. But you're the Pope. Pope. I know, but I've been thinking about retiring lately. Dees. You know dating leads to marriage. Why would you want to get married? Pope. That's one way to know what hell is really like. Dees. Never thought about it that way. Pope. Are there older ladies looking for ex-popes? There's gotta be some women that are younger than my dentures. Dees. Are you sure you want to do this? Pope. Do you think it's too late for me to start looking? Dees. I have to look into how ex-popes left their chosen professions and remarried. Do you know of any? Pope. I know one retired 90-year-old pope that started dating, finally got married to a woman the same age. They spent their honeymoon trying to get out of the car. Dees. Will you look like you've been working out and staying in shape? There could be hope. Pope. I try to stay in shape. At my age, weightlifting means standing up. Dees. You have to stay in shape. My recommendation is to walk as often as possible. If you ever needed a transplant or any type of replacement, I'm afraid they don't make your parts anymore. Pope. You know, I'm so old I can remember that the Dead Sea wasn't dead, it was only sick. Dees. How do you look at old age? Pope. Well, old age means you've come a long way, baby, and you just run out of gas. Dees. It's a different world out there, Pope. If you plan to leave the clergy at your age, you better be prepared to make sure you're able to, take care of a woman's needs. Pope. Will a plan on making love almost every day? Almost Monday, almost Tuesday, almost Wednesday. Dees. Well, it's time wrap this up. Before you leave, I have a cat that just passed away. Pope. Cats? I don't think so. Dees. This cat was very special. Do you know of any churches in the area? Pope. The only church I think that can bury a cat is the Methodist church down the street. Dees. Question: I love this cat. Do I give the Methodist priest the envelope with $5,000 before or after the burial? Pope. $5,000? I can handle the burial. I didn't know the cat was Catholic. Dees. We'll talk. Pope. Thank you. Document. Can't wait to see you at the burial. Dees. Thank you. Pope leaves. Eva, could you send in our next patient? Capilotto. Hello Doc, one day I think I'm Ed McMahon, the next day I'm Foster Brooks. The Shrink, Michael Dees and Tony Pomponio. Written by Mike Kalana for Wise Guys Cooking. Shrink. How are you doing, Tony? Tony. Doc, I got a lot of problems. Shrink. Tell me about your problems, Tony. Tony. You know, I think I'm Rodney Dangerfield. No kidding, Doc, some of the things that are happening to me are spitting image of Rodney Dangerfield. Shrink. There's something going on here. You're the second person today that thinks he's somebody he's not. Tell me about your problems. Tony. A girl phoned me the other day and said come on over, nobody's home, so I went over, nobody was home. Shrink. That's very unusual. Tony, let's start with your childhood. Tony. When I was born, the doctor came out to the waiting room and said to my father, I'm very sorry, we did everything we could, but he pulled through. Shrink. Your dad sounds like a very caring man. Tony. I don't know about that. When I was 14 months old, I took my first step, my old man tripped me. Shrink. Tell me about your dad. Was he a loving person? Tony. I could tell my dad thought I was very ugly. All I remember is rejection. He used to buy me presents. Once he bought me a yo-yo, it never came back. Another time, I asked my old man if I could go ice skating on the lake. He told me wait till it gets warmer. Shrink. Anything else? Tony. He carried around a picture of the kid who came with the wallet. Shrink. You're kidding. What about the rest of your family? Did you have problems in your childhood with your parents? Tell me about your mother, you know it all start there. Tony. My mother never breastfed me. She told me she only liked me as a friend. Tony, CONT'd. You know, my mother had morning sickness. The sickness started after I was born. Shrink. Tell me about your teenage years. Did you have a girlfriend? Tony. Yeah, I did. She was very ugly. They used her in prisons to cure sex offenders. Shrink. Your first date, what was that like? Tony. I was making love to this girl and she started crying. I said, are you going to hate yourself in the morning? She said, no, I hate myself now. I get no respect. Shrink. Were you happy growing up? Tony. I came from a real tough neighborhood. I put my hand in some cement and felt another hand. Shrink. Oh my. You're married, right? Tony. Yeah, my wife is a very smart person. But I don't know, I thought we had a happy marriage. Last night my wife met me at the front door. She was wearing a very sexy negligee. The only trouble was, she was coming home. I got a lot of problems. I get no respect. Shrink. Go ahead. Tony. She cooked the other night and fixed me alphabet soup. It spelled help. Shrink. Are you and your wife still romantic with each other? Tony. I'm not sure if she still thinks I'm the love of her life. Shrink. Why do you say that? Tony. She only makes love to me for one purpose. The last time she used me to time an egg. Shrink. I see a pattern here. What other problems do you and your wife have? Tony. One night I came home, we kinda got romantic. I figured, I'll play it cool, wait for her to make the first move. She went to Florida. Shrink. Tony, it can't be all bad. Tony. I get no respect. One night I took my wife to a restaurant for her birthday. I made a toast to the best woman a man ever had. The waiter joined me. Shrink. What else gives you the impression she doesn't love you? Tony. My wife was afraid of the dark, then she saw me undress, and now she's afraid of the light. Shrink. I'm sure you lead a very interesting life. Tony. My wife likes to talk when she makes love. The other night she called me from a motel. Shrink. You know this 23andMe ancestry fad is all over the place. Have you checked into that? Tony. I used the website who'syourgoomba.com. My mother's side of the family was very stupid. During the Civil War my great-uncle fought for the West. Shrink. Keep going. Tony. My grandfather was so stupid he worked in a bank and got caught stealing pens. Shrink. Well, Tony, I think I can get to the bottom of this problem you have. Tony. I don't know, I hope. I'll give you another example. This morning I put on my underwear. I could hear the Fruit of the Loom guys laughing at me. I get no respect. Shrink. Let's make an appointment for next month. I'll send you my recommendations, follow them, and we'll make some progress. Tony. I hope you can help me, Doc. Shrink. Eva, send in my next patient. Larry Capilotto. Hi, Doc. Shrink. How can I help you? Larry Capilotto. You know, one day I think I'm Ed McMahon, the next day I think I'm Foster Brooks. Stiff Sketch 1. Frank DeSalvo. Let's welcome the president of the Chicago Funeral Parlors Association, Franklin C. Stiff. We're honored to have you back on Wise Guys Cooking. Franklin Stiff. I am pleased to be here alive. On your show again. Frank DeSalvo. How was the grand opening of your new Sunny Side Up cemetery? It was something to behold. Stiff. Thanks to my daughter Stilla. Who's in charge of our Living Human Resources department. She worked very hard to make our grand opening full of life and excitement. Frank DeSalvo. Your daughter? Stilla Stiff? Stiff. Yes, my wonderful daughter. Susan Stiff. She has her master's degree in cremation studies. Frank DeSalvo. Cremation studies? Stiff. Yes, Frank. Stilla graduated with honors from Last Watch University. Her major was full-body cremation. DeSalvo. How did she liven things up? Stiff. Yes, Frank, she's created Sunny Side Up Cemetery atmosphere, a place not to die, but a place to live. Frank DeSalvo. How did you come up with the name Sunny Side Up Cemetery? Larry Capilotto. I'll have a side of bacon and a biscuit. Frank DeSalvo. Larry, we're talking about very serious matters here. Larry Capilotto. Just trying a little gallows humor. Frank DeSalvo. Save it, Larry, and now back to Franklin C. Stiff. How has she uplifted the Sunny Side Up Cemetery? Stiff. Yes, the name of Sunny Side Up Cemetery. Stilla has created a new vision that gives our deceased friends the feeling like you're coming home. DeSalvo. Coming home? Stiff. Yes, Frank, I'd like to invite you and Larry to come home. Stella can give you a personalized tour of our crematorium. DeSalvo. I'm sure it would be a trip to remember. Right, Larry. Looks over at Larry, he's dozing off. Larry would love to visit, right, Larry? Nudges Larry. Larry. Right on. Stiff. We feature vibrant flowers, local art, and bubbling water features that line the paths that wind throughout our 50 acres of botanical gardens. Larry. Sounds like heaven on earth. I've picked out some spectacular grave sites for you, Larry, and your Wise Guys Cooking cast. Side-by-side plots, as it were, that could serve as your final resting places. You and pals can enjoy the mirth and merriment above and below the ground while your audience watches repeats of your TV show. Larry. Ad lib, kind of like a drive-in for the dead. DeSalvo. We'll take a rain check on that, Franklin. What else can you tell us about Sunny Side Up Cemetery? Stiff. Sunny Side Up Cemetery is very welcoming. For instance, one our clients recently lost her loved one. The family honored his life by roasting baby back ribs in a fire pit next to the grave site with family members. DeSalvo. Baby back ribs? Yes, Frank. Rather than having a traditional funeral gathering with guests in dark suits and formal dresses, the family dressed in Hawaiian shorts and lays huddled around their loved one's casket having a good old-fashioned tailgate party. DeSalvo. That sounds like a great celebration of life. You and your family have really thought this through. You are always welcome on our show. Thanks for your cemeterial information, Franklin. Let's hear for Franklin C. Stiff. We'll be back after these messages. Stiff 2. DeSalvo, CONT'd. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Our frequent guest, he's become a leading figure in modernizing the funeral business. Let's welcome the president of the Chicago Funeral Parlors Association. President, a big warm hand for Franklin C. Stiff. Stiff. Thank you, Frank, for that introduction. Remember, we were formed from and became a living being. I digress. We're here to talk about the funeral business, are we not, Frank? DeSalvo. Yes, we are, Franklin. Thanks for opening our eyes about what families go through after their loved one is gone. Stiff. We've almost thought of everything, Frank. We want to shirk the conventional customs of death by changing attitudes about the end of life. One funeral at a time. DeSalvo. You've streamlined the way funerals are conducted. Stiff. Yes, Frank, more personalized ceremonies, attention to funeral planning, environmental concerns, and a wish for lower costs, so we can breathe new life into the business of death. DeSalvo. What are some of your ideas, Franklin? Stiff. My wife Stella, together with my daughter Stilla Stiff, have created a giving atmosphere for families of the deceased by showing their gratitude by as they gather around the barbecue, by contributing to what we call a 50/50ths fundraiser to show their appreciation. DeSalvo. I've heard of those 50/50 fundraisers. Tell us how they work. Stiff. We pass the hat, the winner collects half of the donations while the other 50% goes to Sunny Side Up Cemetery. DeSalvo. How clever, always thinking, Franklin. What else do you offer? Stiff. Yes, Frank, it's wonderful to see the peaceful smiles settle over the faces of the families on their way to yoga classes. They meander among the foliage that blooms around gravestones on their way to lay down on their yoga mats and do yoga poses. DeSalvo. Yoga at funeral services, how unique. Name some popular positions. Stiff. Our most popular position is Shavasana, or corpse pose. DeSalvo. The corpse pose, of course. Stiff. The corpse pose is a modern yoga exercise, often used for relaxation at the end of a session. It captures moment with the deceased nearby. It brings you close to the grave, as it were. DeSalvo. A pose to behold, I'm sure. How clever. Having you here to talk about life and death issues is always something our audience is interested in. Thanks, Franklin. Let's have a hand for our guest, Franklin C. Stiff. Stiff 3. DeSalvo. Once again, we welcome the president of the Chicago Funeral Parlor Association, Franklin C. Stiff. His family has helped many grieving mourners during the passing of their loved ones. Let's have a big funeral director welcome for Franklin C. Stiff. Franklin, welcome to Wise Guys Cooking again. Our audience comes to life every time you visit our show. Stiff. Thank you for your kind words, Frank, and even though you have not said anything, Larry, I still have the 2-for-1 package of crematorium discount coupons you can and your loved one can use anytime. They do have a 2-year expiration date. Don't let this opportunity die. DeSalvo. Die? Larry. Later rather than sooner, I hope. DeSalvo. Being a funeral director must be quite an undertaking. Stiff. Will Frank, we have stayed away from that pejorative title in favor of caretakers of the terminally deceased. Or as I like to put it, we are the procurers of sacred spaces. DeSalvo. What are some of the new trends in the funeral business? Stiff. Unlike some of the underworld folks here in Chicago, we don't get paid to hide bodies. But there is a rise of bizarre extreme embalming. DeSalvo. Tell our audience about this new trend. Stiff. Larry would appreciate, there is a trend where the deceased are arranged in lifelike poses, so they can attend their own funerals. DeSalvo. Larry would be great at this. Stiff. Using Larry for an example, he wouldn't be seen dead in a boring old coffin, he would be posed up like a waxwork at his funeral. Right, Larry? Larry. When I go, I want to be remembered how I was alive and looking my best. Stiff. We wouldn't have it any other way, Larry. Larry, just in case you get cold feet, we can always tie your shoelaces together. Larry. You're always thinking out of the box. Stiff. Remember your 2-for-1 gift certificates, Larry, don't let them expire. Larry. We'll get right on it, Franklin. DeSalvo. You're a funeral director? That must be quite the undertaking. Competition must be stiff. What is the main cause of death? Stiff. Too many birthdays. DeSalvo. Well, there you have it, folks, another walk in the cemetery with our favorite funeral director, Franklin C. Stiff. We'll be right back. Stiff 4. DeSalvo. Once again, we welcome the president of the Chicago Funeral Parlor Association, Franklin C. Stiff. His family has helped many grieving mourners during the passing of their loved ones. Every time he appears on our show, Franklin C. Stiff breathes a little life in our audience. Let's have a big funeral director welcome for Franklin C. Stiff. Larry. Still a stiff? DeSalvo. You've thought of everything. That is a very innovative way to end a funeral. Stiff. It's an incredibly sad and somber event. I see a lot of our families choosing to focus on life and not on death. DeSalvo. You were telling me that you have a choir that sings while the drone is flying around sunny side up cemetery? Larry AD Lib. DeSalvo. I imagine day or night this is a spectacular event. Stiff. Yes, Frank, we focus on the best aspects of the loved one and the wonderful things about their life. Larry. You have a very creative mind, sounds very impressive. Stiff. Thank you, Larry, for jumping in. We do make this an event where people want to be and want to come back. It's like watching the fireworks shows at Wrigley Field on Friday nights. Incidentally, we do offer a fireworks show if your family desires to end the festivities with a big bang. DeSalvo. Sounds like you've planned for everything. Stiff. We're looking forward to our annual car show featuring 10 of our pre-owned hearses, coaches and limousines, and for special funerals, our priceless horse-drawn carriage. DeSalvo. Sounds like you have a fleet of funeral cars. Stiff. Yes, Frank. Stiff. This historical coach will be displayed in front of a large tombstone at Sunny Side Up Cemetery during our first annual car show. DeSalvo. A car show, that's a great idea. Stiff. We will encourage our deceased members' families to donate their loved ones' cars and display them at Sunny Side Up Cemetery. We call it our Cars for Caskets fundraiser. DeSalvo. Cars for Caskets. Stiff. Yes, this annual car show will feature your loved one's automobile, truck or tractor, rumble up next to your loved one's headstone as classic car aficionados mingle among the living and the dead. DeSalvo. Must be a very popular event. Stiff. Yes, it is. And for a few extra dollars, we can create a cardboard figure of your loved one sitting in the driver's seat. Frank, I've seen these lifelike images, and you would never think your loved one was dead. DeSalvo. Larry and I would love to attend one of these events. How can we get free tickets to this groundbreaking event? Stiff. My daughter, still a stiff, will give you a free pass to our Sacred Spaces car show. Right now we have hundreds of folks waiting for cancellations. Larry AD Lib. How can we get to the head of the line, Franklin? Stiff. Well, Larry, that's simple. Make an appointment to get fitted for one of our custom coffins. That will move you to the front of the line. DeSalvo. Larry, you better reserve a spot while you're still standing. We always appreciate your service improving the life and death decisions that grieving families face when burying their loved ones. Let's hear it for Franklin C. Stiff, all of the stiffs in his family.